Hello everyone and welcome to this Hacksaw Techniques video. In this video I'm going to show you how to cut straight and true. I'm going to show you how to start a cut, how to follow along a line, and if your blade starts to deviate from that line, how to steer the hacksaw back on track again and get it level with that line. The job we're going to do today is on this piece of 2mm thick steel plate. I want to cut the end off and make this nice and square. Be holding the job in the vise. 2mm steel, we're going to be cutting this at 90 degrees to start off with. We need a 32 teeth blade for that. Now I've fitted a 32 teeth blade in my nice straight hacksaw here, and this is the one that I'm going to be using for making that cut. Now the first thing we've got to do is put the correct tension on our blade. Now at the end of the last day when I used this, I loosened the blade off, and that's always a good thing to do because it lets the frame and the blade rest. Also, when you pick it up again for your next days of hacksawing, you can make sure that you've got the correct tension on your blade. Now what the blade tension should be I've covered in a previous video called Hacksaw Basics. If you need to know how to set the tension, go see that video. So I happen to know that the tension on this blade needs to be 2 complete turns once all the slack is taken out. So I've taken the slack out and I now advance this half, 1, half, 2. This blade is now ready to cut our job. And here is our job. Oh, hi everyone. This is now our job. The line that I've scribed on this surface is just down here. Now this is a piece of scrap that I'm just going to cut to show you how to hacksaw nicely. If this was a job, something I didn't want to damage, then I'll be using soft jaws in the vise. However, it's not, so I'm not going to. Right, now I've got it in the vise. This is you can see it's a bracket, so it's bent over at the top here. Between the line and the side of the vise, I'm leaving about 10 to 15 millimeters, around about ½ an inch. I'll show you why in a moment. So we've got that in the vise and we can do the vise up. And now it's time to start our cut. Now, I want the cut to start on the right-hand side of this line that I've scribed. Now, that means I've got to start the cut at a precise place. Now what I'm going to do is use my finger as a stop, so I'm putting my thumb and finger down on the edge, and then I'm going to push the blade up against my finger. Now remember, the blade has got the teeth at the bottom, so that's sharp, and if you try and use your thumbnail, you can chew the end of your thumbnail up. So if you use the edge of your finger on the top part of the blade, this is nice and smooth and you won't lose any skin or any fingernails. So I'm pushing the blade against my finger, I'm getting it in the right position, and now I'm going to start to just go backwards and forwards slowly like this. Now the end of the blade is normally sharper than the center because you tend to bias your cuts towards the center. So when you're starting, it's a good idea to start with the front of the blade in the position that you want it. Then you've got your sharpest teeth to start cutting, and then you can move it around to get it in exactly the right position. Also, because we're hitting this at a slight angle, there's not many teeth on the blade, so by going backwards and forwards we start to cut that edge until we get a nice plain area for the blade to start on, which is just there. And then once it's working nicely, fingers onto the front of the hacksaw, and now start to cut. Now I'm only doing short strokes at the moment because I'm about to break into a square hole in the top of this, and I don't want the end of the blade banging down onto the other side of the square hole. So I'm doing it nice and slow, and then that will come through. Just there. Right, now you hear that squeak. That squeak is called chatter. What causes it are the teeth pulling the job. The teeth comes along, and as the teeth pops off the end, the job will spring back. The next tooth comes along, pulls the job, and then clips off the end and springs back. Now the way you get rid of that is by putting the job or the cut as close to the vise as you can get it. Now I've left away ½ an inch because what I want to do is have a nice long stroke and allow this side of the blade, this side of the frame, to get as close to the job as I can. And I was hoping that it wouldn't produce too much chatter because it was a bracket shape, but unfortunately we're getting lots of chatter. So all I'm going to do is open up the vise, bring the job in, so the line is now about 1/4 of an inch, 5mm away from the edge of the vise, and then with that extra support, the blade is now a lot happier. And I'm going to just carry on cutting until I just come around this edge. Now, as we're cutting, we need to be aware of several things. We need to keep the hacksaw upright. If we go one way or the other, then the cut will not follow the line. We need to be aware of the angle that the hacksaw blade is at, and we also need to be aware of the length of cut that we're doing. Now, as we go backwards and forwards, what I'm trying to do is keep the blade as flat as I can. Now, because my arm is hinged at the top, this is going to be going backwards and forwards. The arm will have to bend at the wrist to take that out. So concentrate on the blade and try to get the blade to stay as level as you can get it and as upright as you can get it, and also try and make the stroke as long as you can. The longer the stroke, the more material you will cut in each stroke. Whilst you're doing all that, you're also checking the distance between the line and your cut. And at the moment I'm running down the edge of the line, so there isn't a gap, and that's what I hope to keep. So this all takes a little bit of practice. A lot of people think hacksawing is a simple thing to do, and it is, unless you want to do it well. Now, we want to stay close to that line, so we need to be aware of all those things I've just spoken about. Now, you don't have to do this fast. The important thing here is accuracy. That's what we're aiming for. I'm looking at the line, I'm looking at the blade, and I'm seeing where they're touching, and I'm concentrating all the time on that spot. So if I see the blade coming away, sorry, the cut coming away from the line, then I will bias the top of the blade to the right slightly, and then it will start to come back to the line again. And then as it's there, I will then straighten up the frame. Earlier on, I said if you wanted to steer the cut that the blade was making, you can lean the top of the hacksaw over, and then that will bias the cut towards one way or the other. Now, I want to just say something about the blade so you understand what's happening here. Now, if we look at the teeth of the blade, like that. Now, in this image, you can see that there is a wavy line. The teeth aren't straight. Now, that wavy line is caused by what's known as a set of the teeth. The teeth are actually bent away from their middle position out one way. On an hacksaw blade, they have it's like a progressive angle. So the amount of set that's there gets larger, and then it stops, gets smaller, and then it's bent the other way. What that means is when the blade is cutting, the teeth cut a slot that's wider than the back of the blade. Now, if you imagine your blade in a slot that's wider, if you bias the top of the hacksaw over, the blade will tilt a little bit because there's some clearance on one side. As it tilts, it's now cutting in a different direction. If we tilt it the other way, then it will cut in that direction. So if you're looking down at your cut and you see that your cut is going, say, to the left, then what you need to do is bring the top of the hacksaw, just bias it slightly to the left. That will move the blade over. The blade will take the clearance up and now start to cut right. As you see the cut getting close to where you want it, you then bring the hacksaw upright again. And this is why it's so important to practice and remember where your angle is, and then keep the angle the same. And as you're hacksawing, you're concentrating on the angle all the time, and you're looking down at where the cut is going with respect to the line that you want it to follow. And that's the secret of getting a nice straight and true cut if you're cutting vertically down on your job. You notice that I've moved the job now around in the vise. So we were cutting this surface at an angle like this, and we're now going to cut it at an angle like this. Now the reason I want to show you this is because we steer the hacksaw blade in a different way than if we were going at this surface at 90 degrees. Now before, if we were going through at 90 degrees, if we wanted to steer the blade, we would roll the hacksaw blade over one way or the other. But when you're doing in this direction, that doesn't work. What you have to do is concentrate on the cut as before, but if you want to move the cut over, you have to bias the handle either towards you or further away, depending which way you want the cut to go. And you have to concentrate really hard. The more you concentrate, the more adjustments you make, the better and the closer your cut will be to the line. So I'm cutting now. Now, again, this takes a little bit of practice. The more practice you do, the better you'll get at this. This is a close-up of that cut I've just made. It's not too bad, is it? And that's how you get an hacksaw to cut straight and true. Could you do something like this? Of course you can. And with that, this video is at an end. Take care, everybody. I'll see you next time. Could you do something like this? Of course you can.